Welcome back. The creation of fake nudes using artificial intelligence using the technique of hyperfaking or deepfake is gaining momentum in secondary schools across the country. A phenomenon with serious consequences for the victims, which has become a cause for serious concern. Joining us is Professor Laurent Charlin. He's an associate professor at HEC Montréal, core academic member at Mila, Quebec AI Institute, and Canada. Okay, another word salad here. CIFAR AI chair. A lot of words out there. You're on a bunch of stuff, Professor Charlin. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Hi, Dave.
Hi. So, okay, I know Mila. Mila is the big hub for AI in Montreal, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So it assembles researchers from local universities, including McGill, University of Montreal, Laval, Sherbrooke, under the same hood. And it's not only a pure research institute, we also do sort of tech transfer, right, to make sure that some of the innovations that researchers come up with help sort of the economy effectively.
All right. And CIFAR, what's that?
CIFAR so this is an interesting organization. They fund basic research. They're the ones that funded neural nets and deep learning research 20 years ago where it wasn't cool, it wasn't the hype. And now it's sort of thanks to them that we're having the breakthroughs that we've seen over the last couple of years.
This is great. Thank you so much for spending some time with us because you have real domain expertise in this field. So, I mean, you're seeing the deep fakes, and it's a huge concern, especially for our children, but you see it everywhere. We're talking about it in politics. We're talking about it during the playoffs. I mean, you would see these press conferences with athletes, and, it was the real athletes, but it was like their voice and saying really outrageous things after sporting events. It's everywhere. I mean, how does this work? I mean, how can AI do this and be used by individuals for very, very unacceptable purposes?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. I think there's maybe two elements. The first one is these sorts of systems that can recreate things like images and videos and even audio, right? Mm-hmm. Sound, voices. Mm-hmm. These are things researchers have been working on for a long time. It was seen as a very sort of challenging thing to be able to do. Mm-hmm. And over the last couple of years, we've seen really great advances, and there's lots of good usage of these things. For example, recently in the McCord Montreal Museum, there was an exposition where they used some of these techniques to sort of give a 3D rendering of some of the work of Duncan, a Montreal artist from the 1800s. Mm-hmm. There's also interesting interviews that people have done with actors that have passed, right? So imagine learning how to dance, maybe from Elvis Presley, or exploring antique Rome, right? So there's lots of interesting applications, but of course, and I think this is what you mentioned, there's lots of worrying applications of this, right? So AI, I think it has this dual-use technology. We believe it has great benefits and really good things, but of course, it also has nefarious uses.
Well, it's like anything, right? It's like nuclear energy, right? It's used in medicine, and it's used for power plants, and there are nuclear bombs, and so even here, I mean, Yoshua Bengio and others around the world have warned about the horrific consequences of AI. So the idea here is, and how can we try to prevent these types of horrific uses? Because we now know there's data that psychologically speaking, for young girls, I mean, it's horrific. I mean, it has deep consequences, deep problems that are caused psychologically, and there's social media and that and everything. But what I'm looking for from you is more that, is there a way to use AI, to use technology to be able to stop these uses from spreading?
That's a good question. So I believe there might be things we could do with AI, for example, to try to detect content that is fake, right? So can I maybe have another AI system that looks at images and tries to say, is this a real image of this person or is this a fake image of this person? I think the issue there is that it'll be a bit of a cat and mouse game as systems that generate these images, that make up these fake images, get better. It's going to be harder and harder to detect the fake ones from the real ones. So I think, eventually, or in the short term, maybe that's a part of the solution, but I think we need a response that I would sort of call a more societal response, right? So there's a couple things that are in the works right now in Canada. First of all, there's legislation that will affect especially what we call high-impact AI systems, so AI systems that could be used to have an impact on the world, a big impact on the world, let's say. So I think that's one thing. Another thing is, of course, prevention, right? So sort of a little bit like fake news, right? Now we can be wary as consumers when somebody says something. We could be maybe a little bit wary and say, okay, what is the source of this thing? Is this coming from a news outlet, or is this just a random video that I watched on social media or on YouTube, for example? And certainly as, a parent with kids or young kids, there's sort of good discussions to be had about the impact of this, right? So be careful, right? Putting images with your face or putting images of you online on social media, publishing them to the world can have these consequences, and vice versa, right? Doing something like creating a deep fake of somebody in your school, perhaps, and then spreading it around, that can also have real consequences, right? So if we're talking about sending nude pictures, for example, of a colleague without their consent, of course, this is a criminal offense, right? So it's not because it's online and we can use AI that none of the rules still apply.
Right. Yeah. No, it's child pornography for sure. And so the idea here is also a lot of leading expert, Jonathan Haidt in the U.S., for example, with his book, The Anxious Generation, talk about age gating. Any thoughts on that? Age gating access to social media and ultimately also access to AI?
That's a good question. I can only speak for the AI part.
Sure, of course.
Looking a little bit at the landscape, what I see is that these sort of tools are, one, getting better, and two, they're getting more and more accessible, right? And so whereas 5 years ago, you would have really needed an AI expert to do anything of that kind, now if you search online, you'll easily find, tens of websites that allow you to create deep fakes. Of course, some of them have safeguards. They're trying to make sure that you are creating a deep fake of yourself, or they have these sorts of safeguards, but often there are ways to bypass them. And so in this, internet world, I think in general, it might be very difficult to make sure that these tools are only used by some people and only used for things that, only used for good intentions. Let me say it this way. And I think this is a bit of the crux of the problem, right? There's lots of things I might want to do with these AI tools, create images, like, me creating an image of myself doing something funny, that is probably okay. But me creating a picture of somebody else doing something funny and then distributing it to colleagues or to, fellow students, if I'm in a high school, maybe that's not okay. And so the intention here, right, the AI tool has no idea of the intention of the user. That's I think why it might be so hard to find purely technical solutions to this.
Definitely a conversation that we're going to need to continue, a very important and serious one. Professor Charlin, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to continue the conversation whenever you want.
Thank you, sir. Professor Laurent Charlin, Associate Professor at HEC Montréal. He is part of Mila. He's a part of CIFAR. He's a leading thinker on all things AI.